Hello and welcome to Muscle for Life. I am your host, Mike Matthews. Thank you for joining me today for another interview with my buddy Jordan Syatt on how to make fitness a sustainable lifestyle. At least that was the plan going into the talk. And as you will hear, it meanders a bit, but I do think it was productive meandering. And it also was mostly, at least tangentially related to the topic of sustainable fitness, not just getting fit, but staying fit for the long term. How do you achieve that? How do you make sure that you are consistent enough with the things that matter the most to achieve and maintain a healthy body composition, a healthy relationship with food, and also just a generally healthy body? And in case you are not familiar with Jordan, he is a world record powerlifter. He is Gary Vaynerchuk's personal trainer, and he's also the owner of Syatt Fitness. And Jordan's down-to-earth approach to fitness and nutrition has made him a much-loved figure in the fitness community. And Jordan is just an all-around good guy. I always enjoy catching up with Jordan, and I hope you like this catch-up as well. Hello, Jordan. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, you're looking well rested for a dad of a 10-month-old.
Dude, she sleeps like a champ. It's like the first 5 weeks were brutal, like absolutely like brutal.
Yeah. Sleep deprivation, torture, basically.
Yeah. But since 5 weeks, she slept between 8 to 12 hours a night, leaning more towards 12. So she's been killing it. It's been great.
I wish I did not have that experience with my kid, especially my son. I think now my wife was sleeping. I would usually, at that time, we were in a condo. And so I just started sleeping on the couch because he would wake up every hour or two. And then he always wanted her. My presence was just not required. Like he wouldn't accept my even attempts to soothe him anyway. So I was like, whatever, I'll be over here on the couch sleeping. But I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, man. Everything's going well. How's everything with you? Everything good?
Yeah, just, busy with work and busy with this farm construction project that I have taken upon myself and my wife. We've taken upon ourselves, which is a pain in the ass. And, I expected it to be a pain in the ass, but it's always one of those things. It's easy to intellectualize like pain. Oh, it's going to be a pain in the ass. It's another thing to go through it and be like, oh, this is a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? Like everyone I've spoken to has ever built a house even. It's like, it sucks. Just expect it to take way too long and cost way too much money. You are not going to have a good time. And then you add some other farm elements into it. So, now there are more moving parts, but we're going to stay the course. It'll be cool when it's done. It just is. It's one of those things, actually. I mean, you probably can relate to this. Maybe people can relate to this. You can certainly just think in your business, but really like any goal that you are really wanting to achieve. And when things are moving too slowly, or it feels like things are moving too slowly, and not only are you really anticipating this outcome, but there are elements of where you're at currently that you really don't like, you know what I mean? So you're like pulled toward this thing, and there are things that you're living through every day where you're like, oh, I just can't wait until it's not like this, you know what I mean? And then, so you put yourself in that situation and then make it take what feels like way too long, and everything is slow and everything takes way, so it's just, I'm not a very patient person by nature. So maybe I can look at like, this is a good spiritual challenge for me or something, because it requires patience.
I can't even imagine. And then once it's all said and done, I don't know how in depth the farm is going to be, but man, that's like the personification of patience needed when you own a farm. Like that's like an unbelievable amount of work, time, effort, patience. Like that's amazing that you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have a scaled down operation, so to speak. But yeah, I would like to grow food, and you're absolutely right. And fortunately, I have some good resources, some people who know a lot about that stuff and can help at least get it going. And we'll see how far I want to take it and we have some horses, look into maybe a couple of other animals, but I'm not looking to create a commercial enterprise. It is really just first and foremost, it's just a family residence. But you're right. It comes with even just more cognitive overhead, so to speak. And I think that's something that, I don't know if you've had these discussions just over the years, particularly with people who have been financially successful and then expanded their lifestyle. I've just heard that. I can think of a few instances of people who went through that process of acquiring more and more stuff that sounded cool to have until they realized that even when they had the money to create systems that, include people for managing stuff, it just required their attention, some of their time, some of their energy on an ongoing basis. And again, none of this, I don't want people to think I'm complaining, oh, poor me with my farm. No, but there is something to be said for that, where depending on what your priorities are, and this is something that I've also had to kind of like think about in terms of priorities between work and family. And then I am needed now for things related to just this farm. And it's still just in the construction phase. So there's something else to consider before taking on such an endeavor, is make sure that you're willing to give it what it's going to require to make it run the way you want it to. Otherwise, that it just adds further frustration,
I think it's a good way to put it, like the cognitive overhead, because even like once you get to a certain point where things are more or less streamlined in your life, I think it's easy. I know I struggle with this, where it's like, oh, cool. So now I have so much more time and energy to devote to this, which technically is true. But then I don't think, at least for me, sometimes I overestimate what I actually can handle because I've streamlined X, Y, Z amount. But then I don't take into consideration like, okay, well, those couple of hours of what I thought were downtime were actually essential to me. And, being with my wife, being with my daughter, making sure I get a full workout in without feeling rushed, things like that. Like those are essential to me. And then if I try and add things on top, so for example, we're actually in the process of building a house right now. And one thing I've wanted for a while is chickens. And I've lived in an apartment for the last over 10 years of my life. So this will be my first time back in a house with a yard. And chickens are something I really want, but I also know it's like, that's going to be a lot of extra work. And it's just chickens. So it's like really trying to educate myself on that, figure out, like learn about it as much as I can. So by the time that does happen, it's not overwhelming, but I'm sure it absolutely will be. So it's definitely everything is a learning curve.
Yeah, that's funny that so you started a similar process. It sounds like a mini farm of sorts.
Yeah, like the most miniature that I could ever be. Like it's not even a farm; it's just chickens, and then we have a pond on our property that I want to fill with fish. So it's not a farm; it's just like I'd like to have chickens.
Yeah, I'm thinking about exactly for my property. My understanding, I haven't looked into it too much. My understanding is that chickens are relatively easy to care for. That's my understanding.
Yeah, correct. I think I would imagine they're among the easiest and relatively low maintenance, especially compared to like, I don't know, a cow or a horse or any.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I see cows. So right around the corner from my farm, there's a large piece of land and there are cows out there just hanging out. I've never seen a single person in that field. I've just seen cows. They seem to take care of themselves for the most part.
Maybe, or maybe the person taking care of them is out there at like 3 or 4 in the morning. I don't know. I'm not a farmer.
That's very true. They're on like they have to be on a reversed schedule. That's why I don't see them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'm excited about it, but that's awesome that you're doing that, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, it'll be, I do think it'll be worth the headaches when it's done. Next year, early next year, the house will be done. And then the rest of the stuff will probably be done, I don't know, maybe mid to late next year. And then if I haven't sold it, that means that I guess I'm liking it. I have a friend who, he's going on probably at least a year and a half, if not 2 years, building a house in Nevada. It was supposed to take a year to a year. Yeah, probably a year. It's at least 6 to 10 months overdue now. And so it's this whole process. And he spent a lot of money on the plans and project manager and builder and the whole thing. And they messed all this stuff up. And after all that, he's so sick of the whole experience that he decided not only to just sell it, and he's going to lose a lot of money, just sell it. Say, I'm done with this, finish it, sell it. And I'm leaving this entire state. He's living in Nevada, and he doesn't like, and he moved there primarily for tax reasons, and he doesn't like that it's so hot, and he's like in a desert, and there are tarantulas and scorpions and rattlesnakes and stuff, and he can't let his kids go out and play at certain times because there are coyotes roaming around, and things that he doesn't like. But it's just that construction experience in particular just soured him so much. He's like, I'm going back to California. This is it. I'm going to Beverly Hills where I want to be anyway. And I'm selling this and I'm never coming back to this state.
Jeez, that sounds like an awful experience. And I'm just praying that's not what happens with us.
Yeah. When we're done speaking, I can share with you a few tips things I've gleaned, like looking back now already. Things have been smooth-ish. Inevitably, there will be delays. You probably are going to have to spend a bit more money than you think, but I'll share a few things that might help you avoid like extensive delays and major budgetary overages where you're like, okay, like I guess I'm just going to be writing checks a lot. Anyway, to switch gears here, I wanted to get you on to talk about something that you've created a lot of content. Over the years, I've seen a lot of tweets from you and Instagram posts and so forth where you've talked about this, and I like your viewpoints on it. And that is how to make fitness more sustainable, how to customize it for your lifestyle, for your goals. And I think we can go all over the place with that. We can talk about how that relates to eating, how that relates to training, how that relates to maybe other kind of health considerations, lifestyle considerations, because while some of us may wish that we could make fitness our top priority and get in the gym at least 5 days a week, if not 6 days a week, and train for at least an hour, if not 2 hours per session, and have our chef make every meal for us that's perfect to the calorie and macro, and so on and so on. I mean, I don't do that, so I don't know how many people listening do that. And so we need an approach, a fitness regimen that is more flexible and just more realistic, especially given where most people are at. That fitness is important, but it is not the top priority. Sometimes it needs to be well down the list of priorities because that's how life goes.
When it comes to sustainability, I have a lot of thoughts on this. And the first place that I look is like, why do people struggle with being sustainable? Like, why do people struggle staying consistent at all? And I found that the number one reason is because people often overestimate what is necessary in order to actually see results. So, and as a result of that, they end up, I need to work out 7 days a week and it needs to be for 4 hours and I need to be perfect with my nutrition. And then as soon as they can't do it, which is obvious because that's not sustainable for anyone, they feel like they screwed up and then they end up quitting. So the number one thing I think is understanding that consistently good is infinitely better than inconsistently perfect, and realizing you don't need to be doing insane amounts. Now, candidly, I've been saying this for years and I very much believe it. I'm almost starting to go in the other direction now, though, in terms of like, you should be doing more, just because I've seen such a huge push for people to do less and to do less and to do less that I'm almost like, I'm trying to balance the messaging now. Like, I've seen people being like, yeah, as long as you get like 2,000 steps a day, you're good. I'm like, you're out of your fucking mind. Like, why are we shooting so low? 2,000, like, I don't know, if you're 85, maybe like that would be like really great. But if you're not 85 and ill, I would like, there's a 93-year-old woman out of Illinois who walks 3 miles every day. And it's just like, that's significantly more than 2,000 steps, So I very much believe people don't need to do as much as they've historically been told they need to do. But I'm also trying to balance that with people being told, just do less, just do less, just do less.
I'm glad you brought that up. I think that might be worth speaking about a little bit further. And maybe this is what you were just about to do, is give some specifics in terms of what would be too much and then what is not enough. 2,000 steps a day, not enough. And I totally agree with you. And that's partly marketing, right? It's kind of a sexy marketing message. Like, no, you barely have to do anything, really. There are parallels to that even in the body positivity movement, where no, you cannot be healthy at any size or at every size. You can be healthy at many different sizes, and exercise is always healthy regardless of what size you are, sure. But even the aesthetic component of it, I would argue, not to go off on a long tangent, but I would argue that the classical standards of beauty, which is not like a starved out model who subsists on like ice chips and cocaine. But that if you look at the more classical aesthetic sensibilities are more rooted in biology than social constructs. And so Now, some people, there are always outliers, there are always exceptions to every rule. But I think there are similarities to what you're saying, even in that regard, where anyone can be physically beautiful. We're not talking about like cute or mildly attractive. No, beautiful. To me, that's a strong term. Beautiful. She is beautiful regardless of how she looks. Or he is beautiful regardless of how he looks simply because he says he's beautiful. I don't agree with that. I think it's fundamentally just at odds we could start with common sense.
Yeah. There's a lot of research around this, the biological standards. Like I don't know why it's taboo to talk about, but yeah, it's very real. In terms of what I look at having the most impact on health, I always go to just movement. I don't even go to I'm not talking about CrossFit. I'm not talking about powerlifting. I'm not talking about high intensity interval training, just walking basically. And if someone can't walk for whatever reason, just again, movement, whether it's swimming, cycling, rowing, I don't care, just movement. Walking just tends to be the easiest to measure. And so you just give someone a pedometer and it's a much easier measurement tool for researchers.
But it is just walking, though, to the point that you were making. I agree that walking is great. Everybody should walk every day. However, I don't know if you've seen this. I've certainly seen this on Twitter, where I see a bit more because I spend a bit more time using Twitter, like creating content for it and blah, blah, blah. And it's funny how consistently tweets regarding walking and the benefits of walking do quite well. And I think part of that, though, is coming back to what you mentioned, is there is this marketing angle of you don't really have to do hard stuff. And if you just do the easy stuff, you're totally fine. I try not to forward that message while still acknowledging that walking is great. Everybody should be staying active, walking, get outside, get in the sun. But let's remember, though, it is just walking, and 10,000 steps per day or 15,000 steps per day is only going to get you so far in terms of your fitness and your health.
Yeah, I think that here's the way I look at it. In terms of if I'm looking at someone's overall lifestyle, the first thing I'm looking at is what makes up the majority of their day. And it's like, if I have someone who's never worked out, is super unhealthy, very unwell, walking is the first thing I'm going to discuss with them. Maybe walking and sleep, realistically. In the last few years, I've seen anywhere from, on the low end, like 1,500 to 2,000 step recommendations a day, which is just wildly low. And I think dangerously low is a fair term to use, all the way up to 25,000 steps a day on the very, very, very high end. People in support and research in support of either of those. I actually haven't seen any research in support of 1,500 to 2,000, but I've seen people saying there's research, but I haven't found it yet.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. So what I've found is, generally speaking, between 7,500 to 10,000 really being like where you get the most of your benefits. Up to 16,000, I found that there actually are like significant benefits with. But now where I come into play is like, what if instead of getting those extra 6,000, that's when we strength train?
Yep. Because remember, that's an extra probably 45 minutes at least of walking. Now, if it just happens because of your lifestyle, maybe your job, you're on your feet a lot, that's great. But if you're having to make that happen by going out and going for a walk, I go out for a few walks. I like to also use that time to either listen to a podcast, or listen to an audio book, because why not? I'm just walking around. Or if I have to make a phone call, I'll hop on the bike back here or go outside and go out for a walk. But to go from 10,000 steps per day, which is probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours per day for most people, to 15,000 or more, to your point, well, that is now another 45 to 60 minutes that you are having to allot for some sort of exercise.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so if during that time you could get strength training in, I think that would be a far better use of your time outside, rather than trying to get an extra 5,000, 6,000 steps, or maybe even 15,000 steps, depending on the person.
Or even on certain days, I've told people that, if they have their 45 minutes or so, 60 minutes in the day, and they can walk, or let's say 2 or 3 days per week, if they can do strength training, just because of the consequence of their lifestyle, like that's really all they've got. And on those days, they are not going to be getting 10,000 steps. But if it's scenario A, they get about 10,000 steps per day, but no strength training, and they do that 5, 6, 7 days a week. Or scenario B, where they're getting those steps in most days, but then there are 2 or 3 strength training days in there where they're just getting in fewer steps. I think the latter scenario wins out in every way.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is another reason also why I'm such a huge proponent of zone 2 work, because inherently you will be going a little bit faster. And so you'll get your steps in more quickly. And I also think just the health benefits of zone 2.
Do you want to explain what that is, just so people know?
Yeah, so there are different systems. Some have 5 zones, some have 7 zones, there are various ones, but generally like you have different zones. Zone 1 essentially being what for most people would just be walking, where I sort of explain it by like imagine you're on the phone with someone. If you're in zone 1 and you're walking, they wouldn't even know that you're moving. You could be on the couch, you could be walking, but based on your breath and your breathing, they would have no clue. Zone 2 is slightly higher intensity, where it's slightly uncomfortable, right? Where if you're on the phone with someone, they'll be able to know that you're moving and that you're exercising, but it's not in any way, shape, or form impeding the conversation. It would be inappropriate in a business setting where, like, if I was in zone 2 right now, it would be enough for listeners to be like, what the fuck, dude, just sit down and talk. But like, I could talk without really an issue. Anything above zone 2, we're going 3, 4, 5. It's getting exponentially more difficult and it would seriously impede the conversation. And this is getting into more higher intensity type training. So zone 2, I think the main benefit is you get all of the benefits of zone 1, just overall movement, with the added benefits of more aerobic capacity. You get so many extra cardiovascular benefits without the negatives that come from zone 3, 4, 5 training, which is essentially more stress on your overall system. And depending on the modality that you're using, potentially more stress on your joints, tendons, ligaments as well. So if you're doing sprints on a treadmill or something, you're going to have a lot of ground impact forces on your body, which it's not inherently bad, but you can't rack up too much of that because it's very, very stressful. You're also using at zone 5, you're using essentially the same energy system that you'd be using at doing like a max effort deadlift. And so that produces a lot of stress on your central nervous system, on overall recovery. With zone 2 work, it doesn't affect your recovery. In fact, I would argue it probably helps your recovery, and you get greater cardiovascular benefits as well. So this is another reason why I'm a huge proponent of zone 2, because while walking 10,000 steps leisurely in zone 1 might take an hour and a half, getting 10,000 steps at zone 2 might cut that in half or close to that. So you get more bang for your buck in less time.
Yep, I think that's a great tip. Really what it is walk faster. And then as that gets easier, walk faster. And then as that gets easier, that's actually one of the guys who works with me for my birthday. He got me a GoRuck pack, and then add that. So it's just, and for people listening, it's just a backpack really. And then there are some weights he got me. So I haven't even set it up yet. It just arrives, and you put weights in it. And then that allows you to make your walking just a little bit more difficult, to Jordan's point, to just bring it into that zone 2 level of difficulty, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Dude, the walking with a weighted vest has been my absolute favorite activity from like a cardiovascular perspective. I broke my rib about 5 weeks ago in jiu-jitsu, and so I can't really do sprinting. I can't really do high intensity work right now. So I've been putting that on. I just put the treadmill at an incline of 15 and about like a 2.7 speed. And that's my zone 2 right now. And like, it's amazing. I love it. I get significant levels of difficulty without needing to put my body through high levels of stress. I love the GoRuck or weighted vests or anything like that. I think they are severely underrated. And I'll say for the average and everyday person, especially if you've got a lot of weight to lose, you don't need to put more weight on. Like just go on a walk, maybe go on a walk on an incline or something. But for someone who's looking to get a little bit more intensity into their training without necessarily needing to increase the speed, which can add more damage and more stress on your joints, just put a weighted vest on, and that it makes it significantly more difficult. And it doesn't need to be super heavy. 15 to 20 pounds is fine.
Yep. Yeah, I prefer the faster walking with a weighted backpack or a weighted vest over, because then really if you're not going to do that, you have to start jogging. Jogging's fine, but I don't particularly enjoy it. And I just don't want the added stress on my joints.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is funny because 25-year-old me would be like, what are you talking about? Stress on your joints. But now, like, and I'm not old, but at 32, I'm like, oh, I feel that. Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm 39. And I've taken good care of myself, but there are differences between 39 and 29 and 19. There are differences.
it's crazy, man. And you hear it when you're young and you're like, yeah. But there's a certain point where it's like, oh, like I feel my Achilles now, or like I feel my knees or my lower back. Like, wow, this is real. Yeah, it's very important to be aware of that and track of your biomarkers and how your body's feeling so you're not overdoing it. And to know that there are different modalities that you can do that are relatively simple and easy to set up that don't hurt you is amazing.
Do you want to transform your body, but you just can't seem to break out of the rut? Have you read books and articles, watched videos, listened to podcasts, but still just aren't sure exactly how to put all the pieces together for you? Or maybe you know what to do, but you're still struggling to stay motivated and on track and do the things that you know you should do. Well, if you are nodding your head, I understand. Getting into great shape is pretty straightforward when you know what to do, but it's not easy. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes grit. And that's why I created my VIP one-on-one coaching service. We take people by the hand and we give them everything they need to build their best body ever. We give them a custom diet plan, training plan, supplementation plan. If they want supplements, you don't have to take supplements. We coach them on how to do every exercise correctly. We give them emotional encouragement and support, accountability, and the rest of it. And we are pretty good at it too. We have worked with thousands of men and women of all ages and abilities and lifestyles and helped them build a body they can be proud of. And guess what? We can probably do the same for you. Our service is not for everyone, but if you want to find out if it's for you, if there's a fit, head over to buylegion.com/VIP. That's buylegion.com/VIP and book your free consultation call now. And just to play off of what we were talking about earlier, I'd love to hear your thoughts on higher intensity work, which is kind of goes along with this trend of do less. You don't have to do as much as all these people are saying, do the bare minimum, but we'll couch that as like the minimum effective dose. So it sounds kind of technical, like 2,000 steps per day, minimum effective dose. And don't do 10,000 steps per day. Like, no, now you're just sedentary, period. And so with that, I've seen people also, I would say, downplay some of the benefits of adding some high intensity work. Maybe it's not, I think you could make a good argument that it's not vital, but I do also think that many people, influencers and experts and so forth, I've seen talking about this type of thing, they tend to not acknowledge the very real benefits of doing, let's say most of your work is in this zone 1, zone 2, or maybe just most of it just zone 2. But then if you were to add, call it just 30 to max 60 minutes per week of higher intensity interval of some kind. It could be on a bike like this if you don't want any impact, or on an elliptical or swimming or rowing or whatever. I personally, like you, I wouldn't recommend running sprints outside on concrete or on treadmill. It's just going to beat you up unnecessarily. I did that when I was probably 23. So physically as invincible as I ever was going to be. And even then I couldn't do it. I couldn't do a few nights of sprints per week, plus the squatting, plus the deadlifting. It was just too much. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I agree. I think a lot of people are downplaying it. And I think they're downplaying it because they don't understand it.
And it's hard. It's not particularly fun.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I see both sides. I see some people way overplaying it and saying like, this is all you need. Someone sent me a post today saying, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Basically, someone saying all you need is high intensity. And I'm like, good luck. Like if you're doing high intensity work properly, like you shouldn't be able to do more than I would say 30 to 60 minutes maximum per week. And that's like a very high end. When I calculate total minutes of high intensity, let's say you're doing like, we'll take a classic example of Tabata, like 10 on, 20 off, or 20 on, 10 off, whatever variation you're doing. I calculate the total amount of time at the high intensity sprint. So the rest actually doesn't count. If you're taking like whatever, a minute rest or however long the rest periods are, I don't count that truly towards the high intensity. It's the total cumulative in that high intensity zone. So I think again, going back to the example of someone who's very unfit, a lot of weight to lose, like I would not have them do that for fear of so many issues. But once you get to an intermediate level, like I think it's actually a great thing to play around with. And especially if you're someone who really, really cares about your performance. And we can break fitness down into 3 main goals just for the sake of ease. I would say there's pain reduction based goals, there's aesthetic based goals, and there's performance based goals, right? So if you really care about your performance at a higher level. And we're not talking about pain reduction. We could loop aesthetics into this if we wanted to, but especially from I don't know, improving your mile time or getting maximally strong or more explosive and more powerful, whether it's competing in any type of athletic competition. If you are at the very minimal intermediate lifter, if not, or intermediate athlete, if not leaning more towards advanced, and you're not including it, you are shortchanging yourself. You will be missing out on those benefits. And again, zone 2 lower intensity it should make up the majority of your conditioning. But that doesn't mean that there aren't serious benefits to including higher intensity training once or twice a week in short but very high intensity bursts.
And what about weightlifting? Because you have gotten, I don't know what your training is like currently, but you've gotten very strong. Like you haven't just dabbled in weightlifting or strength training. You've put up some impressive numbers. And so have you found that in your own training and just in your experience working with people that including high intensity cardiovascular work has improved your strength, especially on kind of all out efforts with weights?
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if I can honestly say high intensity cardiovascular work has improved, but what I can say is, and this might be a debate in terms of whether or not I consider this high intensity cardiovascular. I'll give you an example. I very much believe that very heavy, very intense kettlebell swings for, say, 5 sets of 5 radically improved my deadlift. I absolutely think that speed deadlifts with 20 seconds rest between, and this isn't high intensity, but between like 50 to 75% 1 rep max radically improved my maximal effort deadlift. So I think the kettlebell swing is probably a better example because it is very heavy, it is very high intensity. The only reason I'm shying away from calling it cardiovascular, even though I guess technically it is. So yeah, it is cardiovascular. It absolutely is. So yeah, I think you just have to choose the modality correctly. I don't think that like a 20-second sprint would have the same carryover to my deadlift. But if you still apply the law of specificity and technique and apply that to whatever movement you're trying to get specifically strong in, absolutely, it can 100% help.
I've definitely noticed it in sets. I'm thinking of deadlifting, probably starting at about 6 reps, certainly 8, certainly 10 rep sets taken close to failure. I mean, those final few reps, it starts to feel like cardio. And as my cardio improved, I noticed that I just had a bit more gas in me toward the end of those sets. And I probably was able to squeeze out at least another rep or two because I was just more cardiovascularly fit. And I know that's not necessarily like when people think of max effort, powerlifting, deadlifting, they think of 1 rep maxes. Okay, fine. That's not that, but not even high rep, just higher rep sets where you really start to notice your heart beating. I noticed improvements just by working on my cardio.
100%. I love that perspective from the just being able to make it through without as much fatigue. The other perspective, and this is really related to maybe the super heavy kettlebell swings, you're essentially training your body through this cardiovascular modality to be more explosive, more quick, more powerful, have a higher rate of force development. And so if you can increase your rate of force development, if you can improve your force output through this modality, then all of a sudden a set that might have been difficult for 5 before, you might be able to do that set for 7, 8, 9 now because you were able to create more force directly off the floor. And then now it actually makes the lockout much easier. So you're less fatigued by the end of it.
Yep. I never included speed training just because I never trained specifically for the big 3 for powerlifting per se. I've always followed a hybrid type program where there's a foundation of just kind of pure strength and then some bodybuilding work. But if I were to want to get maximally strong on the squat, on the deadlift, on the bench press, it makes perfect sense. And that's also something that athletes should be doing. Basically all of them, that should be part of their training because even if you are like a professional ping pong player, more explosiveness is better.
Yes. And I think from an athletic perspective, it's one of the most misunderstood and least represented aspects of training right now. But even then, even not necessarily from an athletic perspective, like if I was working with a 65-year-old woman, like I would want her to be able to be relatively explosive. I would want her to learn how to do that, because there are many instances in which you need that. You need that ground reaction time. You need that explosivity. And I obviously wouldn't start her off with that, especially if she was completely untrained, because just basic strength training will improve that. But as you get to a higher, more advanced level, it makes a lot of sense to include it a little bit. And I think the best part about it is you don't need much in order to improve. In fact, it's very easy to do too much. I think just a few sets, 2 to 4 sets of a few reps with real solid intent at the beginning of your workout, immediately after your warm up, and you're good. It doesn't require a large volume. It's a very low volume, high intensity. I think going back to what we've been discussing this whole time, it's the intent of your intensity. It's like if you bring like all of your power, speed, explosive work, it's far less about how much or how fast, and far more about how much are you intending to try to move as explosively, as quickly as possible. The actual benefits that you get are based on the intent that you bring to it, not necessarily how quick you actually move.
Interesting. A mind-muscle connection type of scenario. And for people who want to try it, you mentioned it could be 2 to 4 sets of a given exercise. It sounds like even per week. And then what does the loading look like? And you said, it's a few reps. When you do that, or if you program that in for somebody who is just curious to see, let's say they've been strength training for a bit, they're pretty strong now, they've never done anything like this, and they're just curious how it might affect their regular training.
Yeah, so it really depends on the movement, the modality that you're using. Again, I want to clarify, this is after your warm-up, before your main heavy lifts. You don't want to do this when you're already fatigued. This is consider a primer, so that once you get into your heavy lifts, it's actually going to help you lift heavier. It's going to help you perform better. So you don't want to fatigue yourself doing it, and you don't want to do it when you're fatigued. We could use a quick example of something like a squat jump or a box jump, where you don't need any extra loading. You do 3 sets, 5 reps, and I would take a full recovery in between every set. So I would take at least 60 to 90 seconds in between every set. And here, the intensity is gauged not by how much weight you're lifting, because it's just your body weight, but by the height of the box. So generally speaking, I would say, and it can be somewhat hard to gauge, but the more you do it, the more you'll learn. It shouldn't be a max effort box jump for 3 sets of 5. Treat it in the same way that if you're doing 5 reps with a heavy weight, that's about 85% of the 1 rep max. So generally, by the 5th one, it should be somewhat difficult, but you shouldn't be failing. So it should be like about an 85% of your 1 rep max box jump height. You can do same things with explosive speed push-ups. Again, you're not adding any extra weight. 3 sets, 5 reps. I personally don't like clap push-ups, not because they're bad, but because people are more focused on getting the clap than they are actually pushing themselves away from the floor. And so rather than doing a clap push-up, I just do explosive push-ups. Try and push yourself as far away from the floor as you possibly can, as quickly as possible.
I suppose if you just left out the clap, maybe if you were to push and you let yourself come off the ground.
Yes, that's it. Yep. That's it. So it's like you keep your arms fully straight. You just try and get
You're just trying to launch yourself as far as you can.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because if you watch people do the clap push-up, they actually end up doing a partial rep, and they just quickly bring their hands in. Whereas if you do some people would call it a Superman style push-up, where they push themselves as far away, and then they can, while their arms are fully extended, they can then raise them over their head. That is true explosivity. So again, something like that, 3 sets of 5 would be great. If you're starting to add weight, you could do something like a kettlebell swing. You could do something even like a sled push using a prowler. You can load weight with that. Again, the main thing to consider here is it's short, explosive sets. So I generally don't like the sets to last longer than anywhere between 6 to 12 seconds. I think that should be generally where the length and duration of the set, a working set, lasts.
And so that'd be something to consider when adding a kettlebell for a hip hinge or pushing a sled. The idea here, it's to go fast. It's not to grind. We're trying to do the opposite of grinding through reps.
Exactly. If you start failing, if you start grinding, you are training the wrong system, you're training the wrong modalities, you're not going to get the adaptations that you're looking for. So it should be quick, explosive speed, focusing on really good technique, using full range of motion and really focusing on trying to be the most explosive with every single rep. So if you're pushing a sled, every step should be the cue that I would use with my clients years ago when I was in person is if you're on turf doing something like this. So I'd be like, imagine your foot is being so explosive that the turf is crumpling up behind you, that as you push, it's so explosive that it crumples up behind you. When you're jumping onto a box, try and push the floor away from you. All of these visuals, and there's research around vertical jump training where the same person, if you just tell them to jump as high as they can, they'll get a certain height. But if you give them a marker above them to try and touch, they will jump higher because now they have something to shoot for and they can actually be like significantly more explosive. Same person, they think it's the same effort, but because they have that external visual cue, they can actually produce more force and generate a greater rate of force development. So little things like that can have a marked difference in your performance.
Let's talk about nutrition now. What are your thoughts on, I'll let you take it wherever you want, approaching nutrition in a sustainable way, which is not going to be make a meal plan and weigh and measure everything every day and don't eat out ever. Like, that's fine if you're getting ready for a photo shoot or trying to get on stage or something. But for most people, when they start to hear that, that's when they just start to check out and they go, yeah, I can't do this. Similar to what you were saying earlier about people on social media working out 7 days a week and doing 2-hour workouts and thinking like, oh, I guess that's what it takes to look pretty good and to get fit. And I can't do that. So I guess this is not for me.
Yeah. So there are so many ways to take this, and I'll start with one that is just so tired and so overspoken about, but it's the most important, is if you've never tracked your calories and macros, you just fucking do it. Like for a week. If you do it for a week, you'll be better off for the rest of your life than if you've never done it. I always start with this.
Do you want to just quickly comment as to why? Just in case people, maybe they've heard it, but they never understood why. What's a week really going to do?
Honestly, dude, it doesn't even have to be a week. It could literally be 24 hours because most people have no clue how much they're eating and they don't know how many calories are in certain foods. They just have no idea. If you want to see someone cry, have them weigh out a true measurement of peanut butter for the first time in their life. It's devastating. I remember the first time I did it. This isn't worth it anymore. And all of a sudden it goes from like one of your favorite foods to like this, why would I waste my time on this right now? So when you really start to understand and get very quick glimpses of how many calories something is, it makes you think about, is it worth it? Is this actually worth it to me? Which brings up a great question, because if you don't know how many calories it is, then like everything is worth it. Like you just have no idea. I would liken it to finances and a budget. If you've always just been given money by your parents and your parents are super rich and money has never been an issue for you, then everything is worth it. It's not a big deal because you can just always go like, yeah, mommy and daddy's money, I'll go buy it, not a big deal. Well, let's say, God forbid, mommy and daddy's money goes down the drain, you lose it, and all of a sudden you've got to start budgeting and taking care of stuff. Well, now you're going to start, well, how much does this cost? And how much do I have in the bank? And how much am I bringing in? And now, is buying this Prada, whatever, worth it? Maybe not. And so it's the very similar concept where you don't have to do it forever. You can do it for a very brief period of time, but it will radically enhance the rest of your life.
And there's a similarity there between calories in, calories out, and money in and money out, in that just as we only have so much money to budget with, whether we like it or not, we only have so many calories to budget with, so to speak, whether we like it or not. If we spend more than we have, there are consequences. There's credit card debt, high interest, blah, blah, blah. Similarly, if we consistently eat more calories than we burn, there are consequences. We are going to get fatter, and that is not necessarily an issue if we're okay with it up to a certain point. But you just need to know there are real consequences, whether you want it to work that way or not.
Man, it's so funny to me how much the industry has changed over the years, where it's like, now we're just like, it's okay if you want to. It's like, when I got in the industry, that would just never be something that was said. It's just like, we're always checking, like, because people are getting so mad and offended by everything nowadays. Like, I got in the industry, I think it was like 2007, 2008 is when I really started like becoming a coach and started making content in 2011. It's just wild to me how much time has changed in such a very brief period of time, and like overall messaging. It's just funny.
Now BMI is racist. You didn't know that?
Oh, dude, I've been meaning to make content on this. I've been meaning to make a video about it. And
If you want to comment on it briefly, feel free.
it's just ridiculous. You know what I think? Here's what I think. I think that by people going out of their way to say that this is racist, it actually diminishes how bad racism really is.
The word starts to mean nothing because everything's racist. Math is racist. BMI is racist. What does that word mean then? Give me a real definition of the word then. If all these things, especially something like BMI, is racist.
It's one of those things where, from what I've seen, people are saying it's racist because it only included white men in the initial research. That would mean that there are way more things that are racist than just that. If we look at how many studies only include one group of people. So does that mean all of those studies are now racist?
Like, how much foundational seminal research is out there that really caused a sea change in terms of, breakthrough new understandings of things, that just because of the consequence of, just think about in America, up until the 60s, I believe, is when it changed. There were laws in place, immigration laws, to maintain a white supermajority in America. So if you look at the percentage of America that was white, it was probably, I'm guessing, you go back to the 40s and 50s, it was probably in the 90s something percent would be my guess. And then it has steadily declined since then. And I think since the 60s, it's started to decline faster. And so then what you're going to say that simply because of that, like all kinds of scientific breakthroughs that were made during that period are racist and should be questioned, or maybe just we should just, throw them out. They're totally invalid and we just need to start over.
Yeah. But my biggest gripe with this is that whether it's math is racist or the BMI is racist, is we are now truly diminishing how awful real racism actually is. It's sad, man. It's sad and it's scary. And it's, I'm trying to figure out the words to articulate it. It takes the attention away from the real big issues that we're actually facing. It's like, come on. BMI has a lot of issues, and like, I don't think it's the greatest tool. Do I think there are some aspects of it that are actually worthwhile? Yeah, I do, 100%.
Yeah, let's just start with, also on the other side of this coin, it diminishes the validity of BMI, and that if somebody's BMI is 27 and they're not an IFBB pro, they probably need to lose some fat if they want to optimize their health. They are probably now overweight or obese, and there are real health consequences associated with those conditions. And so something like, BMI is racist and here's why it's not valid, could then discourage people from trying to lose some fat when they really could benefit. It's not just a matter of what they see in the mirror. It's a matter of what's going on inside their body and what that means for their future. But because, oh no, scientists have now said that whole thing's racist and nobody pays attention to that anymore, I don't need to lose fat, I'm just beautiful the way I am, then there could be very real health consequences that they could have avoided if they would have not been fed that line.
100%. Yeah, dude, I agree with you completely. It's very interesting to see what people choose to put in their content and all that. So yeah.
If we're going to be cynical, minimally stuff like that it's great for getting attention. Look, we're talking about it. A lot of other people are talking about it. A lot of people I've seen posting about it. It's getting a lot of clicks, a lot of eyeballs, a lot of ears. So there's a perverse incentive to come up with wacky theories, especially if you can tie it into this very inflammatory topic of racism.
That's such a good point, because any content creator will know that it's been getting exponentially and incrementally more difficult to get people to see your content, especially since TikTok came out. It's been very interesting. Pre-TikTok, how much your content was seen was usually almost primarily based on how large your audience was. That was really like and you would slowly and incrementally build your audience. Maybe sometimes you had something go viral, but virality was far more rare at that point in time. TikTok made a whole new concept where it was less about how many followers you had, and it was more about, all right, how long are people watching this one piece of content? How many times are they sharing it? How many times are they saving it? And then we're just going to blow it up if it's getting a lot of views very, very quickly and people are watching the whole way through. And so now that we've seen essentially the TikTokization of Instagram and Facebook and YouTube Reels and all of this stuff, and that's led people to change what type of content they're making. And I think there are pros and cons, but one of the major cons is that now people are specifically making inflammatory content because they know it's going to go viral and their ego's attached to the virality of their posts and how many likes they get, how many views they get, how many followers they get. And it's actually making content worse than ever before because this highly watchable, we can maybe it's like highly palatable content that people are really viewing is like, it's so inflammatory. It's like, well, BMI is racist. I've got to watch this whole video as opposed to a video that would actually be helpful. Like, hey, let's figure out how many calories you should eat, but it's not nearly as palatable.
Next, boring. I mean, if you see how people, I don't know if you've ever seen how people use TikTok in particular, where it's like, nope. Next, 1-2 seconds, boring. A couple boring. Okay. Nope, I'm bored now. Next. Imagine spending hours a day doing that. What that is even going to do to your brain and your attention, your control of your attention. It's bad.
Yeah. And it's funny because how many times essentially do you say no to a piece of content before you say yes to a piece of content? And then that one piece of content you say yes to is also the content that is making it seem like the world is crumbling around you. The world is awful. Everyone's terrible. Everything is racist. Everything is bigoted. Everything. It's like, but how many did you say no to? And how many wonderful stories were in each of those pieces of content? You only said yes to that one because it got your attention, because it's preying on understanding like, oh, this is what you're going to find the most interesting. It's really interesting to me how this is affecting our day-to-day lives, how it's affecting our brains, how it's affecting our worldview. It's pretty wild.
Maybe if you layer in some of the developments with AI that, I mean, soon, probably relatively soon, certainly sooner rather than later, there's going to be so much fake stuff on the internet that it's going to be impossible to know what is real and what is not. And I don't know at this point if it's going to be able to be stopped. So maybe that plus some of this that you're talking about will just cause like a mass exodus from just the internet, where people will just start spending a lot less time on social media and on their phones because it's a whole fake anyway. You don't know what's real, what's not. And it's these networks are flooded with 100 million AI posts a day, deep fakes of people saying all kinds of things. Did he really say that? Who knows? And then they just go, all right, this is too much. And they just go outside and what do the kids say? Touch grass or something. Like, just go start interacting. At least I know that tree is real. I can go like touch the tree, and that's about as real as it's going to get. And maybe I should actually have some real social interactions with real people. I know these people exist. They're not just AI constructs.
Yeah, dude, I hope that happens. I think it'd be far better for humanity if it did. It's funny. We have a nanny that helps us a couple days a week with the baby, and she's young. She's new to the city. And I was asking her, do you have any friends in the area? And she was like, well, I've met some online. I was like, what do you mean you met them online? So like, dating apps. Now dating apps have or at least this one, Bumble, apparently, there's like a section where you can just meet friends online, where it's just like.
I've heard that. It's more marketed toward women, I think, right? To meet other women, or?
I have no idea. She just told me about it like an hour or two ago, which I thought was very interesting. Yeah, I would love it. And this is coming from someone whose entire business is solely based online, and a major part of it is driven by social media. We went back to flip phones and just getting outside and spending hours at it, being bored.
And being okay with being bored.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that's just part of life. That's it.
Yeah. Sometimes you're bored, and that's okay. Especially if I don't know if you've experienced this in just creative work that, is just a big part of your business and your personal brand, that boredom is kind of a part of the creative process too. And sometimes you get great ideas kind of from nowhere in periods where you are just downshifted and you are bored and your attention's kind of just wandering. I've read a bit of research on this, and there seems to be a clear link between that and creative ideas?
Dude, anecdotally, I couldn't agree with that more. Everyone always says they get all their best ideas in the shower. Well, why? It's because hopefully you're not spending all your time in the shower consuming content. You're not probably having conversations. Hopefully you're not consuming content. You're a little bit bored, and like you can actually finally let your brain go. It makes all the sense in the world to me. And I generally have my best content ideas. I'm just by myself, or often when I'm lifting or doing cardio and I'm just not paying attention to anything else. It's funny. I'll just have a random idea and that's it. And then I text it to myself because I keep all of my ideas in a text thread with myself, and that's it.
By like sitting down at your computer and trying to get into a hyper-focused flow state, like, all right, it's a brainstorming session. It's time to have good ideas. Go.
Or even in conversations like this, for example, I was really happy when we were talking about why it's important to count your calories even for a little bit. And you pushed me on it and you're like, well, give an example on the spot. I've never used that analogy before. Like if you're using mommy and daddy's money, like I just made that up. But I never would have ever made that up. And keep in mind, I've been making content now for 11 years. It's like, this is the first time I've used that specific analogy, which I'm probably going to make content on with that analogy because I was like, oh, this is actually a really good one. I think people are going to hit home with this. That wouldn't have happened if you and I, we were just having a conversation. And that's, whether it's business growth or whatever, having conversations, sitting down, getting out of your own head and just having a real conversation with someone can also be an amazing tool for creative growth.
Totally agree. For me also, although it's usually hopefully not a boring activity, but consuming content, but for me particularly reading, I often will get good ideas if I'm reading good stuff related to whatever I'm trying to have ideas. That's also been just consistently productive for me. That is usually more productive than not having any ideas and sitting down and trying to come up with ideas.
Yeah. I think the worst type of content to consume for your own health and for ideas is short form. If there's a long form, like the more effort you have to put in to getting the content, the better overall, whether it's sitting down and reading or listening to a podcast that's like this for a couple hours long. Generally, I've found that's where the best ideas come from. For me, one of my favorite ones is I love stand-up comedy. I absolutely love it. And I love the art of it and looking at the transitions and looking at the setups, and like the punchline is obviously where the funny part comes in, but I love watching the setup.
Especially when they're really good at it, because you can appreciate, they make it look so easy and so natural, but what you're looking at is the result of, who knows? I mean, hundreds of hours of iteration and practice and self-critique. And
I think it's such an incredible art form. And you're right, that the best, they just make it look so effortless. And even I love the delivery of how they'll do certain things. Like sometimes the way they deliver, it could be the same word, but the way they deliver that word, they might even pretend to stumble or stutter over that word, but it's actually deliberate because it makes that delivery so much more fun. It's a fine-tuned machine that is just hours and hours and hours and hours of rehearsal and practice. And I get a lot of ideas from stand-up comedy because it's a great art that is outside of fitness that actually gives me so many ideas for how I can incorporate it into my own content and coaching.
I like to try to incorporate humor sometimes, depending on what type of work I'm doing. And I guess my mood at the time of, am I going to try to inject humor into this? But I've tried to do it semi-consistently because I do actually like trying to be humorous. It's, I think, one of the more difficult modes to communicate in and make it actually work. Like people actually laugh when they read your tweet or, watch your video, as opposed to just like, haha, yeah, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? So I can appreciate, I like the quote unquote challenge of that. And like you, I can appreciate the artistry that goes into it. So I understand. It's difficult to do right. But I think also from a content creation, I mean, depending on the project, it wouldn't be appropriate for all projects, but generally with a lot of different types of content, if you can make humor work at least decently well, I think it's a great way to make your content more engaging without cheapening it, like in some of the examples that we've gone over. And it also allows you to show a bit of your personality, help people connect with you on a little bit more of a personal level. it's just hard to do. So most people don't do it or don't do it well, in my opinion, at least in fitness.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's funny. I get a lot of coaches being like, can you help with my sales copy? Can you help with my sales copy? And I don't think that sales copy is worthless at all. I think it's incredibly important. But I think that if you can just make someone laugh, the sales copy just writes itself at that point. Like, because if you can break down the wall, everyone has a big wall in front of them right now. Everyone. And the wall's gotten thicker and bigger over time. Like, I'm thinking back to when email marketing first came out, the wall was like, okay, well, like, I want to get your email. But the wall wasn't even there because everyone was like, email, yeah, I'll take your email, like whatever. It wasn't a big deal.
I mean, I remember when my first AOL address, it was actually cool to get email. Like, I wanted email. Like, you got mail. Oh, what's
Exactly. You're super excited about it. But then once people realized, oh, I'm going to get marketed to and there's going to be spam. All right, well, now to get my email, it gets a little bit more difficult. And say like phone numbers and all of this. Now, like, even people are private with their social media accounts. It's like, I don't know if I want to give that to you. The wall has gotten bigger and thicker and more difficult to get past. So I found humor is the single best way to break down that wall. I don't care how good your sales copy is. I don't care how good, like, if you can just make someone laugh or just smile. Yes, it's done. You're good.
Yep. I've consciously worked toward that. Particularly, I'm thinking with Legion's email marketing over the years, quite a few different autoresponders and sequences that fire off depending on what people are interested in, how they're coming into the top of the funnel and so forth. But the work that I've kind of iterated on over the years, a lot of those, especially the first contact emails, were like, all right, who is this guy, Mike? I've tested quite a bit of even the individual message, like paragraphs in there and changing things and trying to express personality and get a smile. At least try to get a smile out of them as quickly as I can. And I've seen that consistently. If I can get somebody to smile within the first kind of above the fold, maybe one little half swipe on the phone, right? If I can just do something that gets them to smile a little bit, that just goes a long way in getting buy-in to at least read the rest of the email and care what I have to say.
Yeah, it's funny. I think earlier in my career when I was like getting into, like, I just thought in order to do really well as a coach, I just had to be a good coach. It's not it. There's a lot that goes into it. And when I started to realize that and understood that, okay, well, I have to create content, whether it's writing or videos or podcasts, whatever. I forget who said it, but I wish I could remember so I could give them proper credit. But someone said to me, the goal of every word is to get them to read the next word. And that's whether it's a video, podcast, email, whatever. And if you understand that, it's like, cool, how do I just get them to just keep reading a little bit more, a little bit more? It's like, break it down, be humorous, be you. And this is the age of personal brands. And right where it's like, it can be, I think, an easier start if your face and your name are behind it. That's one of the things that's so impressive about Legion is like, it doesn't necessarily have to be about you specifically. That to me is masterful. That in this day and age is, I think, the hardest thing to build from a business perspective, more or less a nameless, faceless brand that's just about like, that's something other than one individual, which is one of the many reasons why I give you so much credit and so much respect, because building a brand not around you is truly infinitely more difficult than building a personal brand. And if you have a personal brand like I do, using who you are and your personality and having that behind you is, I think, one of your greatest advantages.
I totally agree. And that was by design. Even when I started Legion, 8 or 9 years ago, I had a following I had an email list. I had some social media, I had some stuff going for me then, but I was very much thinking specifically about that. Like, I don't want this to just be Mike Matthews supplements. And so what needs to happen for this to be an entity unto itself and something that doesn't solely rely on the Mike Matthews brand and the ebbs and flows of that. And so it's gone fairly well in that regard. And it's pretty straightforward, the overall strategy, but it is a strategy that you have to pursue intentionally because it requires doing things that you wouldn't necessarily do if you were just working on your personal brand and treating it like Mike Matthews supplements. But well, we've gone all over the place and talked about all kinds of things, which maybe that's what we should do in future interviews, is just see where things take us. Because it's always fun to talk to you about fitness, about marketing, about business. Obviously, there's a lot more that could be said about sustainable fitness, which was my idea going into this discussion, but I'm pretty happy actually with some of the other little side roads that we wandered down. So we've been at it here for about an hour. Before we wrap up, if you're so inclined, if you wanted to give people a couple quick hits on the nutrition side of things, just for the sake of balance, I suppose. You mentioned tracking calories and macros for a short period. Is there anything else that you had teed up that you were going to share and then I took you off on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the number one. Do that for a brief period of time. I think, especially, I'm sure your listeners know, like, protein is super important. Like, that's especially in the science-based world. I think hopefully everyone who's listening to this already knows that.
And I will say, though, if there are some women listening who have been resistant to that, and the reason I say women is just in my experience, it's easy to convince a guy, just eat some meat, dude, you'll be fine, whatever, right? But women can be resistant, especially if I think of my wife, who she doesn't really like meat. She's not drawn to a high protein diet. And so if you haven't given it a real try yet, commit to just max, let's say 4 weeks of making the modifications. And it might feel a little bit awkward. You might feel excessively full for the first week or two, but you might also be surprised at how quickly your body composition responds if you are currently not eating enough protein. You might be surprised at how much better your workouts get, like, fairly quickly. You also might be surprised at how much it brings hunger levels down. Even if you don't have a problem per se with hunger, you can go from getting hungry a few times per day, but right up leading up to meals, to like really not feeling hungry at all, or at most just mild hunger. So just sharing that for any women who haven't really tried it yet.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I would say the only other thing I would say that I think more people need to focus on is fiber, especially in a day and age in which I'm seeing a lot of content around how fiber is now bad for you and poisonous and da-da-da. It's
Vegetables, Jordan. Vegetables are going to kill you. They have anti-nutrients. They have fiber. You are such an idiot for eating spinach every day. I just have to end this conversation. Right? You're one of those people.
I'm a bigot. Fiber is bigoted, by the way.
Yeah. Fiber's racist, actually. That's the problem. Because the research that has been done on fiber was mostly white people. So therefore, it's just wrong. I mean, that's it. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works. I really think protein and fiber if you focus on protein and fiber at every meal, it's very hard to overeat.
And let's say you're not saying protein supplements and fiber supplements. I think protein supplements in particular can be convenient. Fiber supplements, I think, more of an outlier. Like, if you're eating well, yeah, because I'm sure you see that too, where people, they'll say, oh yeah, okay, they're going to agree. Yeah, fiber's good, Joy. I like that. So I'm just going to take some Metamucil, and otherwise I'm going to eat like shit. Oh, and I'll take my green supplement too, so I don't have to eat vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's real food. And again, supplements are great. I've used Legion supplements for years. I've had the protein for years. If you're taking the supplement and then your plate doesn't look any different, that's a fucking problem, right? It's real protein, like real whole food protein, real whole food fiber. And there's, quick off the top of my head, raspberries, blackberries have insane amounts of fiber. I try and have those with my breakfast every day. Pumpkin seeds have a bewildering amount of fiber. Navy beans have an insane amount of fiber. Any beans, seeds, lentils, if you're into the chia seed type stuff, those things are great as well. But more fruits, more vegetables, and more protein.
And that doesn't make for a good TikTok video. That's the problem. How do you turn that? Or there's a challenge, at least, like maybe if you inject enough humor, I don't know. How do you make that message into a viral TikTok video? And that's the problem with with fitness content.
Yeah, it's very difficult, which is why years ago I started wearing wigs in my content, just literally for that purpose. And I haven't done it in a long time because it takes a lot of, I have to be in the right mood to put a fucking wig on. And I'm tired of it. So like one day I might get back into it.
You haven't had much wig energy in you recently.
I have not had the wig energy lately at all. Exactly. Even though my daughter's been sleeping, the wig energy has been lacking. But yeah.
I've found that in speaking about creating humorous content that I sometimes have to get myself kind of in the right mood, or it just doesn't flow. I can't even make myself smile. So how am I going to make a reader smile? There is a quote unquote energy. I actually don't even like using that word, because any like slang term that's popular, I refuse to use. That's just like a general standing rule of like my vocabulary. But no, I found that interesting, that if I'm not in the right mood, so to speak, and if I can't get myself into that kind of playful, wacky kind of mood, then it's very hard to create something that I even find amusing, let alone what other people will.
Dude, it's very difficult, especially so much of my content strategy, not even strategy, is so much of a reason why I will make content is because I get angry at what someone else said. And the anger is due to my passion. So then I'll want to make a piece of content. So then the last thing I want to do is come across as angry. Like that, I don't think that's a good strategy. So I will transition more to the educational, but to go from angry to funny is very difficult. And especially like when you just want to get that content done right there. That's why sometimes it can be helpful. Let me take a few hours, get into a playful mood, think about how I could do this, but
maybe watch some stand up. It's a good way to at least get laughing yourself and get in a little bit of a jovial frame of mind.
Yeah. But yeah, man, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure, and I appreciate you. And we'll get you on my podcast next.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whenever you want, you just let me know. And I look forward to our next discussion. I'm sure there will be a next one. And before we wrap up here, why don't we just let people know where they can find you, find your work? If there's anything in particular you want them to know about.
Yeah, just Jordan Syatt, Syatt, Instagram, YouTube, podcast.
Not TikTok though?
Fuck TikTok. I got off TikTok a long time ago. I'm on it, but I don't use it. So absolutely not.
Okay, good. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jordan. This was fun.
Thank you, man. Have a good one.
You too.
Well, I hope you liked this episode. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, subscribe to the show, because it makes sure that you don't miss new episodes. And it also helps me because it increases the rankings of the show a little bit, which of course then makes it a little bit more easily found by other people who may like it just as much as you. And if you didn't like something about this episode or about the show in general, or if you have ideas or suggestions or just feedback to share, shoot me an email, mike@muscleforlife.com, muscleforlife.com, and let me know what I could do better, or just what your thoughts are about maybe what you'd like to see me do in the future. I read everything myself. I'm always looking for new ideas and constructive feedback. So thanks again for listening to this episode, and I hope to hear from you soon.